Brenda Shad brings her Native American heritage to fashion, with roots in the Choctaw and Cherokee nations. When she began her career, she turned identity into creative strength and gained prominence beyond the country. Over time, she became a constant presence on runways and the covers of mass circulation magazines, a symbol of diversity and talent on the global stage. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you. In Gertrude Three-Finger Cheyenne, William E. Irwin goes beyond the immediate record. With a career between 1871 and 1935, he focused, especially in the 1890s and the early 20th century, on a continuous project, documenting the life and culture of Native American peoples, creating a collection that invites the public to a more direct encounter with this history. In the 1926 photo, Bear Bull faces the camera. A Siksika elder of the Blackfoot people of northern Canada, he wears above his brow a braided hair knot made with precision. This sign is not an ornament. It marks his role as the guardian of a sacred bundle linked to the medicine pipe tradition and sums up the responsibility he carries. In the image, history and duty intersect. Long Wolf, an Oglala chief also called Shunkmanitu Hanska, was forgotten for almost a century. His story came back to light in 1997 when newspapers recovered his name. He died in 1892 as part of the cast of the Buffalo Bills Wild West show during a tour in London, a chapter that ended his journey and rekindled interest in his memory. Around 1901, Fred E. Miller made the photograph Sisters, the result of his commitment to documenting the life and culture of the indigenous peoples of the United States. The scene shows Whistler and Hits the One Who Rides the Gray Horse, two sisters portrayed on the Crow Reservation, a territory also called Apsaluk, inviting the viewer to their story. As the 20th century was dawning, Iron White Man joined the celebrated Buffalo Bills Wild West show. As he crossed the traveling arenas, he began to perform on a stage that united spectacle, displays of traditions and artistic staging, bringing diverse audiences together and revealing the intersection between culture and entertainment of that era on continual tour. The ground beneath our feet carries a depth of meaning that transcends common understanding. It is sacred by nature. Every particle, every grain of sand, is permeated by the vital essence of those who came before us. Chief Plenty Coups of the Crow tribe. Native peoples learned early a simple principle. To keep their dogs strong, it was necessary to avoid inbreeding. Therefore, they combined alliances and exchanges between villages, bringing breeding stock from outside and renewing the litters. The result, seen later in records and chronicles, was the great variety of dog types that history has preserved. Upon arriving at Fort Keogh in eastern Montana, Huffman recorded one of his first works, Sioux Urchins, Boy and Girl. Taken in 1880, the photo presents in a studio two Sioux children, possibly siblings. The restrained framing and simple setting draw the gaze closer, inviting the viewer to imagine stories and bonds behind those faces. In 1953, at the height of her fame, Marilyn Monroe passed through Vancouver, Canada, and had a meeting that stood out, a conversation with Chief Joe Mathias of the Capilano Band. The encounter between the star and the indigenous leader took on symbolic weight, bringing together distinct worlds and opening a unique record of cultural dialogue at that moment. In the 1880s, Spotted Tail, Singta Gleska, led the Brule Lakota. Recognized for forging alliances and negotiating with U.S. authorities, he sought to preserve people, lands, and a way of life amid the expansion that advanced over the plains. His leadership guided the community in one of the most decisive moments for indigenous peoples. In 1901, a photograph taken on the Fort Hall Reservation in Pocatello, Idaho, captures a moment in the life of a northern Shoshone family. In the frame, faces emerge in silence, revealing presence and kinship. More than a pose, it is memory. It brings the viewer closer to the daily life, relationships, and territory of that community. Descended from a branch distinct from the Shoshone, the Comanches began in the early 18th century a migration that took them away from the Rocky Mountains. Upon reaching the broad plains, they adapted to the new territory and, in a short time, established themselves as one of the most influential tribes on the Texas plains. There, equestrian life redefined their trajectory. Each photo is a thread of history. Here, a woman of the Northern Cheyenne tribe appears, portrayed in the late 1920s or later. She leans on a cane and displays a decorated scarf, which speaks of knowledge and paths. Her gaze, firm and attentive, seems to guard the nights by the fire and the voices that shaped her memory and the community around her. Around 1900, a photograph captured the face of an Oglala woman. More than a portrait, it opens a window onto the daily life and traditions of this nation on the plains of the United States. Today, the image preserves the memory of a specific life and the historical context that surrounded it, keeping traces of a time that still calls to us. Originating in the Great Basin, in the western United States, the Shoshone shaped their history and movement. From that arid territory, they moved north and east, following hunting and trade routes, until they established a presence in the lands that today correspond to Idaho and Wyoming, where their traditions remain as reference and collective memory. At a train station around 1930, a snapshot recorded an indigenous woman with her son at her side. The scene, simple and direct, reveals a moment of daily life. They wait, observe the movement, share silence and affection. The image, however, offers neither names nor stories. It leaves in the air questions about who they were and where they were headed. Dan George led the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in British Columbia from 1951 to 1963. While guiding his people, he wrote books and poems, amplifying his voice. And when many would already think of resting, he blazed a new trail. He began acting at 60, bringing his experience to screens and stages. His path united leadership, the written word, and art, leaving a mark on the Canadian scene. Lucy Thompson, Yurok tribal chief, left her mark on the history of this people of Northern California. Born in the region and formed in its traditions, she learned English and built bridges with the outside world. She was the first to record in writing Yurok narratives, customs, and knowledge, preserving the collective memory and strengthening the community's identity. Cianina Red Feather Blackstone, born in Eufaula, Oklahoma, belongs to the Muskogee Nation. As a singer, stage artist, and activist, she carried her voice beyond the stages and opened paths. Her trajectory united tradition and future, leaving a lasting mark on the history of her people and influencing Native American culture by calling out injustices and celebrating identities. The Bannock, an indigenous people of the Great Basin, inhabited for centuries southeastern Oregon and southern Idaho. Over time, they shaped roots, rituals, and ways of subsistence that resonate with rivers, valleys, and deserts. Between seasonal movements and exchanges with neighbors, they learned to read the land and make it a partner, sustaining their life and memory. At the beginning of the 20th century, Awe Ayu, a Seneca woman known as Pretty Flower, lived in 1908. Her people, speakers of an Iroquoian language, carry a long trajectory. Historically, the Seneca occupied areas south of Lake Ontario, one of the 5 Great Lakes of North America. It is from this territory that their memories, values, and ways of life emerge. This photograph from 1872 portrays a man of the Arapaho people. In looking at it, we open a window onto the trajectory of this indigenous group present in the United States. Their history, practices, and alliances helped shape the diversity of native cultures of North America, leaving a legacy that continues to guide research and new readings. In 1908, Roland Reed recorded The Moose Call, a scene that invites listening. An Ojibwe man, motionless in the canoe that glides across the lake, brings to his lips an instrument of hide or bark. The breath echoes across the water and calls the moose. In the stillness, tradition and landscape meet, and the gaze perceives the dialogue between technique, nature, and living memory. A portrait from 1906 invites a look at the Caddo Nation. From it emerge echoes of a people who cultivated the land and shaped landscapes now in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. Among fields and rivers, they built villages, exchanged knowledge, and, cautious with outsiders, protected customs. The image preserves a memory that still calls to us. At first glance, the image highlights the war chief's lodge in a Shoshone village in Wyoming, recorded in 1870. More than a dwelling, it was the center of decisions and gatherings. The record suggests the daily life of a people whose social organization relied on leadership and practices that sustained their culture and way of life. Amid the landscapes of the West. In 1898, this photograph records Hakasnacha, the little chief of the Arapaho. More than a portrait, it connects face, name, and history. In the clothing and in the gaze, the presence of leadership appears. At the turn of the 19th century, between tradition and change, the image fixes an instant and invites us to hear what his community conveys about identity and continuity. Called Pima by 17th century explorers, they call themselves Acamel o Odom, the river people. They live in the Sonoran Desert and maintain ties that go back to the Hohokam culture. The photograph by Carlo Gentile, made in 1870, records members of the community and gives body to this history of permanence. This scene is a testimony of continuity, territory, and water.